I have a real treat for you guys today. I have as a special guest Dr. Alexandra Stockwell, and she is a relationship and intimacy coach, actually quite a popular one. And I am honored to have her as a guest today. So welcome, Dr. Stockwell. It's great to have you.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to our conversation, and it's a treat for me as well.
Oh, excellent. I'm going to have you why don't we start with having you just introduce yourself briefly and say who you are. And then I'm very curious to know how you got from being a family medicine doctor to being the intimate marriage expert.
Great. So, yes, I am a physician. I'm a relationship and intimacy coach and an intimate marriage expert, and am known as the intimacy doctor. I no longer practice medicine. I do not have a license. So I just want to make that very clear for those of you who know what that means. But I did. And let's see. I've now been married for 27 years and have 4 children. But at the point, and my husband and I met in medical school. He still practices. And
Okay.
at the point at which I'd had 3 children and we'd been married for a while, I was in my mid-30s. I had my own small holistic medical practice north of Boston, and there were a few different things that converged. Both of my parents died within 2 years, and I'm sure that gave me pause to really consider things. There is one other thing, which is that I had worked hard, of course, to get to that point, and I think I envisioned that it would feel a particular way. And
Mm.
I just didn't feel as gratified as I expected to. I loved practicing medicine. I wasn't burnt out. It was none of that, but something about it wasn't what I had expected. And I
Mm.
thought, this is fine now, but another 4 decades, I don't know that it's going to still be fine. And so I was a little proactive rather than waiting till it became problematic. And then
Yeah.
the other thing that I want to share is that I prioritize my patients over my family and my family over myself. And I knew it wasn't a time management issue. I was doing a lot of things and I couldn't really figure out how to put my own oxygen mask on first. I really don't like that image because it's the one that's relevant when the plane's about to crash. So it's a terrible
Right.
image, but I don't know a more positive, upbeat one. And so I took a sabbatical because I tried lots of different things. And I took a sabbatical just thinking, okay, let me just reset and start fresh. And I started doing things just because I felt like it, which I hadn't really done before. Everything always had a purpose
Wow.
to get to the next level, even going on vacation, right? It's so that we make family memories. And it took courage to just take a painting class because that's what I felt like doing. Go sit by the river because that's where my nose led me and I followed behind. This
Wow.
sounds so benign, but it took so much courage to get in touch with something that was so dormant that has to do with desire, but desire sounds a lot juicier and wonderful. This was much more tentative. Who am I without all of the shoulds and all of the responsibilities?
Right. Absolutely.
So
Very interesting.
I
Go ahead.
took a sabbatical to explore this, and one thing
Mhm.
led to another. And the quick version is that I found my vitality and my joy and my true voice, if you will. I found a lot of what I was looking for in my day-to-day interactions, in my parenting, in my family life, and in my work. But to my surprise, it didn't translate into the bedroom, into how my husband and I were touching one another and the quality of attention we were giving one another. And so when I
Mhm.
realized that the rest of my life felt pretty good, but that part, it wasn't problematic. We were having sex, but it just was more functional. It was nothing like what the poets describe. So
Mhm.
I did a very in-depth training in sex and intimacy that was for lay people, but also was part of a coach training. And I didn't know what a coach was. That wasn't interesting to me at all. I was there for my own marriage, my own sexual experiences and expansion. But when I realized that it was a coach training, I was just curious how these things would be taught. So I went to the teaching lab, and after the first week, I just thought, oh, I have come home. This is a place where I can serve people in the way that I wanted to in medicine, but
Mhm.
from a more integrated and, for me, right position.
That's awesome. Okay. And while you were talking, it came to me. So the analogy you're looking for is, so what organ does the heart feed first? And the answer is itself. So anyway,
That
all
is
right.
what
Well,
I'm looking for. That's beautiful.
yeah, I don't even remember where I heard that from, but it really spoke to me. Anyway,
So
so
not the brain.
oh no, the coronary arteries come out
Yes,
first.
yes, I know when you say so, but I meant that as more of a metaphorical comment.
Yeah. But anyway, so my audience are very concerned with hormones, and we talk a lot about thyroid here, but we talk about menopause and the changes that happen in your body when you hit menopause. And I know that a lot of women, as they approach midlife, their 40s, maybe a little beyond that, they may be in a marriage that's newer, or they may be in a marriage that's been going on for 20 years. And they feel like, okay, something's missing, something's not right here. But it really does sometimes get mixed up into the hormonal changes that happen in midlife. And I want to know, how can people tell whether the changes that they're feeling in their marriage are due just to their hormones, or the fact that, because it causes all kinds of symptoms, even depression. So, how can they tell whether they have a physical problem that they need to go talk to their doctor about, or whether they need to focus more on their marriage?
I love the question so much because conceptually, we can really separate what's happening in the body and what's happening in the relationship as though they're two football fields in different cities. They're just two totally different contexts.
Right.
But in the individual, they're profoundly intertwined beyond what science has yet identified. So let me just say something that's very obvious, but an important starting point, which is that sometimes it's entirely about the relationship. And when the relationship is healed, communication improves, emotional intimacy is developed, then sensual, sexual, erotic intimacy just follows. Another example of this that is probably seen more often because we have access to the information, when you see someone who has had a relatively sexless, or in any case, not very gratifying sex life in marriage, the woman gets divorced. She does no pharmaceutical, she makes no changes in her hormonal status exogenously. She
Hmm.
gets in a new relationship and she is having the sex of her life. She is
Mm.
totally turned on. Her body is working in ways she's never encountered before. And it would be very easy if you just look at the before, this woman in her relationship, to conclude if she just had more hormones, she would be better off. But then with everything that happens with getting out of that marriage and dating somebody new, suddenly there's all this hormonal activity in her body that wasn't there before. So these are
Mhm.
just two examples of circumstances where it's easy to think that it's something medical, and
Mm.
really it's not. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are circumstances where it is primarily medical,
Mhm.
and it still impacts the relationship, because if two people who want to be having sex or want a kind of loving intimacy in their marriage aren't having it, that has an impact. That has an impact in how
Yeah.
they interact with one another. It's almost a side effect that has to be attended to, that sometimes resolves with the medical condition resolving and sometimes needs to independently be resolved. So those are,
Mm.
anyway, either end of the spectrum where it's just the relationship or it's just medical. But in both of the examples that I gave, it's not so clear which it is, which is why I think your
Mhm.
question is so
Yes.
wonderful. And then there's the middle where it's some hybrid situation that I won't give an example because we can imagine what that would be. But so I want to refine your excellent question and
Okay.
focus more on what to do about it as opposed to focus on the plan rather than being focused on the diagnosis or the etiology. Because
Okay.
in this realm, if you can fix things, it doesn't actually matter what the etiology is. It matters
Yeah.
that you feel better, that you're enjoying lovemaking, that you're turned on. Who cares why you weren't a year ago if now you are? So
Right.
with this, there are times when it makes sense to pursue medical intervention first, and that is when other hormonal things are out of balance, so to speak. That seems like a vague term, but I'm just going to use it.
Sure.
If you're anyway looking into hormone health, then by all means look into the hormones that are relevant for libido and sexual expression.
Yeah.
But if you're
Mhm.
not, I highly recommend starting with improving the relationship because that is going to be so beneficial regardless. So that's one thing. And
Yes,
we
of
can talk
course.
about that more. But then the other thing that I would say is helpful is if a woman previously had a good sex life, either with her husband or with someone before, but she knows what that feels like. And then it's no longer available. It's more likely that she's going to be able to revive it by focusing on the relationship than if she never had that before.
Okay.
Now, let me be very clear. That's not evidence-based. That last point I'm making is entirely anecdotal based on my own clinical experience. I don't have a research study to point to it, but it's how I think
Yeah.
about it. That if somebody had a gratifying sex life and they know what that feels like, then chances are they're no longer being offered what would be appealing, either
Mm.
because they need something new or their partner is getting sloppy or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Because I think one more thing I'll say and then I'll stop just to lay this out that this whole idea of libido mismatch, I think is completely a myth. Because when in a heteronormative relationship, the man wants sex and the woman doesn't, and we think, oh, it's about a libido mismatch, I think it's that she's not being offered experiences that she would want more of. Because when
And
she is, that libido mismatch resolves quite quickly.
okay. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I'm just thinking of my own personal situation because I got remarried in 2019 as I
Mhm.
was starting into menopause, and things were fabulous for a while. And I was one of those people who had never really had a wonderful, intimate relationship before. And so I was all about, okay, this is hormonal or this is that. That's a big part of my personal story is that my hormones were not right for years and years and years. But I do think that as you're heading into menopause, I think that the physical changes in your body can really sneak up on you. and make you think that you're depressed, you're gaining weight, you're tired all the time, you're just physically not as comfortable with particularly penetration sex that you as you were before. And so I always think that because that's my personal experience, but what you're talking about um, sounds very valid. Like you said, no scientific studies, but it definitely sounds very valid.
I think one of the elements there in what you said, which I really appreciate how you presence it, and my hope is that anybody listening considers both. Like, it's not
Yeah.
about finding, is it hormonal or is it relational? We just can't just separate. Just not that distinct. If you think about
Hmm.
it, when you embrace someone, it causes the oxytocin to flow. Like, the relationship impacts the hormones just as the hormones impact the relationship. And so it's
Absolutely.
just can't be isolated in that way. But
Yeah.
there are many areas of our lives where we expect growth and evolution. We expect it in our parenting styles, we expect it in physical development of children, we expect it in our finances. We expect to be, doesn't mean we always are, but we expect to be more financially secure at 60 than at 40, and at 40 than at
Right.
20, until it's time to downsize. In the last phase of life, we expect if we're going to move, it's going to be a bigger, nicer home. There just are many areas where we don't expect to stay the same. And for some reason in our culture, we don't appreciate that applies to our sex lives too. Because
Mm.
in our 20s, there's a certain kind of sex that is available. And then in our 30s, I'm talking about it because, of course, numerically we go from 20s to 30s to 40s to 50s, but this evolution isn't necessarily linear in this way, and it isn't exactly correlated with biological age. It's partly correlated with biological age. It's also correlated with psychological age and also the age of the relationship. I think one of the things that happens in menopause, of course, hormones have a role for so many women, and I'm in full honoring of that, especially during the menopause transition and afterwards.
Mm.
However, I think another very important element is that, and it's it's more straightforward how the sex that they looks like more like the sex they would be having at 25. I still think that's not true. There's a tenderness and a depth of connection and a familiarity with a woman's body, again, in a heteronormative context, that definitely evolves. And a
Mm.
feeling of intimacy and being cared for becomes more and more important for most healthy men in a way that isn't necessarily the case early in their sex life. But
Mhm.
in any case, the evolution is less apparent in a man. But for a woman, what makes her feel good, what brings on an orgasm is just going to be different by the time she's in any kind of natural menopause. And I think the skills, both for our lovers and for ourselves, in terms of presence and awakening to sensation, that if we're not open to the evolution of that and we're still thinking the best sex is 25-year-old sex, then we're just not going to be so satisfied.
Hmm. No, that makes perfect sense. All right. Okay. So within coaching, because I've now experienced a variety of different styles of coaching for women in particular, in relationships, they're advised, once a relationship isn't as new or as satisfying as it was, they're advised, you know, treat yourself first, get a hobby, look outside the primary relationship. And I wanted to ask, your opinion about that advice, because I've heard it over and over again. And I love the idea that your intimate partner is your best friend and the person that you really like doing things together with. And it feels like that advice is pushing you away more than it is leading you to stronger ties. So I'm dying to know what you're going to say about that.
I think it is completely wrong. I do.
Okay.
I am a fan of having hobbies and other interests. I'm not saying it's wrong to pursue any of those things. Take a trip by yourself or just with your girlfriends. I'm a big fan of all of that, but not as an alternative to a rich, meaningful marriage. Not at all.
Yeah.
So I think the context for this is that throughout the Western world, the most common relationship advice that is given is that you need to learn to compromise. That if you want to
Mhm.
be happy in your marriage, you've got to be good at compromise. And the thing
Mhm.
is that if what you want is a bland companionship filled with the security of familiarity, then compromise is an excellent way to achieve that. But if you
Mhm.
want to be erotically gratified, emotionally expansive, connected, have an exciting relationship that continues to evolve, compromise will just never get you there. It is completely a passion killer. And passion in the bedroom, but I just also mean passion for life. And the way that I think about this is that when you compromise, you essentially withhold something important to you so that your partner is comfortable in order to keep the peace,
Oh.
in order for
Mhm.
your partner to be comfortable. And so, actually, the name of my book is Uncompromising Intimacy. And when I talk about
Mhm.
being uncompromising, I don't mean that you always get your own way. Absolutely not. I
Got it.
mean
Mm.
that you are fully self expressed, you share who you are in a way, or you learn to share who you are in a way that your partner can hear it and receive it. And so the problem with hobbies and other ways that are alternatives to marriage is that you're bringing less and less of yourself to the relationship, which makes it fundamentally more neutralized and less engaging. It's almost like some of the things you care about, you just check them at the door when you come home at night. And
Mm.
that really numbs a relationship and leads to frustration, resentment, and a sense of toleration. In my mind, the question is, all right, so what do you do? If you're not going to
Yes.
go
What
pick
do
up
you
a
do if you're not
hobby.
going to go get a hobby by yourself? What do you do?
So the answer to that question is in my book, my program, the Aligned and Hot Marriage Program, but I definitely want to give an answer here.
Yeah.
There are 6 fundamental elements, and the first one is to cultivate curiosity. If you think back to the feeling of being in love and just how wonderful that is, you are saturated with curiosity. Where does that scar come from? Where did you go to school? If you didn't live in this country, where would you want to live? If this wasn't your profession, like we just have so many questions, and it's just part of the experience of being in love. And then in the
Mhm.
next phase of marriage or a relationship, it's beautiful to have familiarity and security. Everything isn't so new, and it's comforting, but not if it's at the cost of curiosity. So anyone who's listening, if you want to bring a little more energy and deeper connection into your relationship, start by just asking open ended, curious questions. And they can be whimsical, they can be about sexual fantasies, they can be like, if you weren't, in your case, if you weren't a physician and coach, what would you want to be? where would you like to live? What is your favorite book? Like, it just has to be something that you're interested in that you don't already know the answer to, because
Mhm.
we continue to grow and evolve in all kinds of ways. And I think one of the um, most numbing aspects of a relationship is when it doesn't include our individual growth.
If you don't grow together, you grow apart, basically.
Yes, because we're all growing. And I suppose there are people who stop growing, but that's not the solution either. So the options are to become stagnant and stop growing, stop learning new things, stop paying attention to what's happening in your day that you haven't noticed before. That is one option, but that does not make for a great marriage. Another option is to bring the growth and learning and expansion into something outside the marriage, which is better than becoming stagnant for sure, but it doesn't do anything to enliven or rekindle the marriage. But what does is to bring growth and a culture in which you don't already know everything about one another and you're
Mhm.
curious to do so. I think the best use of a hobby pursued individually, the best use of that for a marriage is to then come back and share your experience. How is it to be on the tennis court after 40 years?
Yeah. No, very cool. That's that's great advice. I think I'm gonna try that myself, actually.
I'm really glad if you do. I just want to say I once gave a talk on how to feel more connected with your spouse. And I talked about curiosity, and there was a woman in the audience. She's actually a nurse or a nurse practitioner. Anyway, she'd been married for 35 years, and she only was at my talk because she wanted to hear the one afterward, and she happened to come early because she was like, I already have a great marriage. I'm all set. I don't need to hear this talk. But anyway, she sat and she paid attention because she was there, and she went home. And that evening, she asked her husband some questions, and she contacted me the next day and said, I was so surprised. I thought we were so connected, but I just asked a few open ended questions and we feel closer than we have in 5 years. We had the most beautiful evening together just from asking questions. And of course, it's
Wow.
also about bringing attention to the other person.
Wow. That is so cool. All right. I think we have just about run out of time. Tell us a little bit more about your book and then how we can find you. And of course, I'll put in the comments the links
Okay,
to
thank you so
your
much.
stuff.
So, the best way to find me is my website, alexwell.com. And from there, you can find links to all of my social media. You can download the first chapter of my book for free or click on the link below to get the book. It's available at Audible and Amazon. I also have a podcast, the Intimate Marriage Podcast. So, anyway, the place to find all things related to me and intimacy is alexandrastockwell.com. And in terms of my book, it's very conversational. It's a very easy read. And I've had lots of readers contact me afterwards saying that they applied what they learned, which was relatively easy to do. It's just like simple things like I've just described with cultivating
Yeah.
curiosity. And so just from reading the book, the marriage has really opened and become more connected, which of course is exactly why I wrote it.
Yeah. No, that is absolutely fantastic. What it has been great having you here, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. I just have to say my little disclaimer at the end. If you're listening to this and you're not a physician, please keep in mind that scientific proof is not nearly as black and white as people think. And in order to make treatment decisions for individual people, sometimes we have to consider evidence that's not nearly as absolute as what we'd like. So this is not construed to be medical advice of any kind, and you should consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may have. And that's all for now. I'm Dr. Dana Gibbs, and my website is www.danagibbsmb.com. And you can find out lots of information about me there too. I've enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you again next week.